Welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to be doing a bit of a dual purpose video. Number one, we're going to be talking about Skyops, which I've already made a video about, but I do kind of want to just give raw footage as to exactly what I'm thinking when I'm thinking about, again, building a team to beat Skyops. I've heard a couple of your guys' requests for, again, more free-to-play teams, and I'm going to be honest with you. I could try it out, and likely it's going to look a little bit weird just because Skyops is one of the bosses that you kind of get to the third tier and then you kind of just blow everything up until you get to that point. But in terms of literal raw value, I would say that the only real really difficult characters or very non-free-to-play leaning characters that you could need when it comes to the team compositions in Dream Realm, or specifically just a character like Thorin. Unfortunate because he's really good, and unfortunately also Smokey. However, to be clear, although again it feels bad to not have these characters, the alternatives are really unfortunate. Now again, for a specifically free to play guide when it comes to Skyops, and again we can kind of test this for ourselves. You don't have great options. Now in terms of healers, you have maybe a character like Niru, who again has a little bit of healing. I believe, which is like, again, this is like maybe one of the worst looking heals I've ever seen, because again, you specifically have to hit like a low health target to heal a singular character, whereas pretty much every other healer in the game allows you to heal in some like meaningful way. You have a character like, again, Human, who is an AoE heal. And then you have also even a character like Rowan, who gives out like the potions and stuff, which of course is like really nice. And he also has the dual purpose of, again, increasing tempo and giving energy to everyone on the team. But in terms of literal value, outside of being kind of like a pseudo DPS, because that's literally what it kind of feels like, right? Outside of this one additional life that you get with Niru, which is maybe not always the most important or that valuable when it comes to a fight where you're going to continuously get downed, I find that it actually feels much better if you have, again, a more consistent healer. And in that, I guess in this case, you kind of have to bite the bullet on either upgrading a character like Faye, whose healing, again, is pretty decent. Again, you have like a couple different ways to heal. Faye herself, again, is not very damage-oriented at all, unlike maybe arguably a character like Niru, who doesn't necessarily have damage, but definitely has a bit more offensive utility. Faye is kind of the exact opposite, or in the sense, just kind of provides more healing, which is why you would maybe use her. Now, again, before we get into actually why I think Faye, though very good, is kind of I guess I would say a bit of a conundrum character to kind of or is kind of a difficult character to fit into a composition, especially for Dream Realm, is because most players, if you're especially starting the game right now, you will likely want to be running a composition that involves, again, likely someone like Odie, because Odie does a load of damage. You probably want to also include someone like Coco, who, if you aren't familiar with Coco at this point, assuming that the boss doesn't silence you or do some freeze weird mechanic, and later on, and I just found out that later on, once you get Coco's exclusive equipment or a later skill that she has, she can cleanse crowd control. I don't know if it doesn't read here, but there is apparently an effect to Coco where you can just cleanse debuffs on the enemy team, which is absolutely ridiculous. But in terms of like literal team building composition, you are very likely or very often going to want to use these three specific characters in some way, shape, or form. If you don't end up wanting to use someone like Odie, you could definitely, again, get rid of Odie and put in another Mauler character. Usually in this case, it's someone like Smokey, who again is a healer and very nice, but then you kind of have to round out the last two picks when it comes to the team with, I guess, your choice of either biting the bullet and just using Ceccia, but then maybe not having an undead or a Graveborn tank, because pretty much if you don't have Thorin, you don't really have access to a great Graveborn tank in general. But otherwise, you could maybe not just use Ceccia, and you could, again, perhaps use someone like Odie, get rid of or not end up using Smokey if you want to have a purely or a fairly free-to-play team. And instead, you would then have, again, someone like Coco in the the more forward-leaning position. But then you would probably end up using either a free-to-play tank like Lucius, which is, again, what most people, I would assume, are probably using because they don't want to die, or they want to put out more shields between Faye, or healing and shields between Faye and Lucius. But this is what I have kind of drafted up to be what I would imagine is the most safe kind of free-to-play composition that you can come up with. Number one, because you want some damage with, again, with Kruger, who reduces damage, reduces physical defense, which pairs very well with Odie, who's going to be your main damage dealer. But Kruger ends up kind of being one of your pseudo DPS at that point, alongside Odie. And it feels more like a solo DPS composition, whereas, again, if you were to switch things out a little bit, the Thorin ends up doing a little bit, or a decent more amount of damage, and that alongside Cannaaaa, who allows herself to not only add more tankiness with Mr. Carlisle, but also does respectable damage herself as a physical damage dealer, kind of makes it feel like the original composition that I've shown prior to be a little bit more meaningful, feels like it has a bit more oomph, leads to more success. But for the sake of this video, I will try a run with specifically just the full free-to-play team composition. You kind of can't get any more free-to-play than this. Again, of course, you might not have some of these characters and you might have to adjust it in your wish list, but none of these are 5 stars or they're obtainable just for free. So let's take a look at how this composition works. Now, again, I will also switch things around. Instead of using a later story spell, I'll try using an enlightening spell that, you know, just increases my attack speed. I can't help some of the stats, and I can't help the fact that I'm 110, unfortunately, but in terms of free-to-play, this is about as good as it gets. So, of course, now we have Lucius, who's the main tanker for this fight. Of course, we have Odie in the back, so he ends up poisoning and does a lot of damage, and Odie, for this specific fight, does feel a little bit bad because, again, there are plenty of mobs that kind of spawn here. Coco, thankfully, during this specific period, is able to mitigate the damage from the laser, but as you can tell, Faye's healing, especially because mine is not even elite or, you know, elite plus or anything like that, is going to kind of suffer in terms of DPS. I might not even clear the first stage, even as a 110, because of just the nature of the composition. It is possible, again, through a full free-to-play composition to clear things out. But, like, as you can tell, I have virtually no investment in this Faye character. I've got basically no not no investment, but it feels a little bit more difficult for me to try out a composition with Odie, especially when my Odie is kind of getting blocked out by all the random characters that are spawning. So in this case, I will end up trying a composition that involves, like I mentioned before, using someone like a Cannaaaa to do AoE, but Skyops, of course, is kind of not doing any damage to my team, for better or for worse, because, again, I should be kind of clearing out the stage very quickly, especially given that, again, I have a 110 set of gear, but this is only enough to get me to number 33. If you look at the leaderboard, 33 does get you decently high, again, especially on my server, but 2.3 million when I'm, like, you know, arguably one of the higher geared characters, I'm like stage 500 at this point, is a little bit concerning. But now let's kind of switch things around. So instead of Odie and this more generally free-to-play composition, let's take a look at what happens if, for instance, we decide not to use someone like Odie and we decide to use someone like Cannaaaa and kind of just bite the bullet. Now, again, to be clear, I understand that my Cannaaaa is definitely a little bit more whale compared to other players because, again, I have the imprints and stuff like that. But in terms of characters that are accessible, available, this is about as good as it gets. You aren't making use of the faction bonus, which I think is kind of an L. However, in terms of how close the allies, or my allies in general, were kind of getting to dying, you could argue that maybe it could be worth it to take someone like Rowan, who I think a lot of players have access to, but otherwise we can try another DPS and see how much damage we do here. So at least in this case now, I have one faction bonus, which kind of puts me over the edge. Let's take a look. So, unfortunately, actually, I didn't even realize this. Muriel just ended up taking the attack speed bonus, which does mean that Cannaaaa is going to be casting Mr. Carlisle a little bit slower than usual, but that's okay. Things like this happen. There's a couple flubs. In terms of actual raw damage, though, it looks like we're doing a decent amount more. Mr. Carlisle is obviously tanking a bit more, and we aren't doing, or I should say, we aren't quite dealing quite as much damage as I'd like to be doing. Primarily, I would say because, again, we don't have the Kruger defense break or physical defense reduction, but we do have two much more consistent DPSs, considering that they aren't locked behind, again, using their ultimate on a singular random mob that spawns. But if you just take a look at here, my characters were almost in danger of dying right here. And again, I'm severely overleveled for this first fight, certainly. And even with the attack speed of Muriel, it just feels a little bit bad. But ultimately, again, like you could tell that with Lucius, with characters that I haven't invested too much into, we still are doing decent damage. We still are pretty much surviving through. And even with just that, as a quote-unquote mostly free-to-play composition, we're still hitting the 2.5 million breakpoint, which, again, in this case, especially for this boss, that's giving you 750,000 books, which is pretty good. I will use another one of my tries again, where I will try to put her back here, and I think she should be a little bit safer. I am curious, again, how much damage I'll do with Cannaaaa in the backline now and having a secondary DPS, but ultimately, again, if you aren't using Kruger, it'll feel just a little bit worse off because we don't have faction bonuses. But actually, you know what? Executive decision. I'm going to just put Kruger in and see how much damage Cannaaaa plus Kruger does. Kruger hopefully doesn't end up getting one shot here. But again, Muriel before was kind of griefing the run anyways. Again, we have Mr. Carlisle here to kind of deal some AoE, and hopefully that lets Kruger continuously deal more damage to the enemy, or, you know, apply more defense breaks or apply more damage specifically. Kruger himself does also do pretty good damage, just as a side note, so don't sleep on that. But it kind of looks safe, in my opinion. Again, like we have the barriers going out from Lucius, we have Coco just to mitigate a little bit of damage, and of course, if the enemy is almost one-shotting my characters with Coco, it probably means that for characters that are a little bit underleveled, or that aren't, you know, experiencing or have the bonus stats from having imprints, probably means that you're going to need, again, some form of mitigation. Coco is probably just, or not even probably, Coco is just inarguably one of the most ridiculous characters from Dream Realm right now, and you can kind of tell why, right? The damage here looks pretty significant. Again, I think we might end up breaking my last record that we just had. Healing going out, we're not dying. Yep, okay, so of all the runs here, you saw it, we just tried 3 different compositions. Even if we lose the bonus from faction, we end up doing more damage, specifically with Mr. Carlisle. Again, there could be a little bit more RNG, but of course, I moved up 4 places. You can take a look at the damage distribution. So much of this, again, is just specifically through Kruger and Cannaaaa, which makes sense because those are the 2 main damage dealers. But thankfully, no one ended up dying. So that's kind of the full free-to-play composition when it comes to trying to clear out Skyops. Again, in terms of actual value, if you do have access to, I believe the name of the character is Marley and Corin. Some of these characters may also be really good. But in terms of actual value, because mine are so low level, as you could tell, even if the composition was better, or if I had more faction bonus, simply because of the imprint and the way that certain things synergize with my team composition, sometimes the actual characters themselves are not going to be as good, or even if they have better kits, well attuned for fighting Skyops. So, on occasion, just the stat bonus and just putting a defense break alongside a high physical damage dealing DPS can kind of be really good. But again, I didn't even need the healing, so having the Awakening spell doesn't really make too much sense. And for the sake of this argument, I won't use, again, like the burn spell or the prison spell or the ultimate spell. But that was Skyops for today. Hope you guys learned a lot from that. But the next thing that I wanted to talk about specifically was that if you've taken a look at, or if you've been playing for 7 days, there is a selector. It's not really a selector, but you get to choose a hero chest amongst these 4 characters. And I have to pause here for a moment, because this is a tough question for me, or this is a tough answer, I should say, for me, because I think that Iron, this character right here, is extremely cool. And if you have characters like Huan, or if you have more wind-based characters, you've been using Leica. Cool character. He does the AoE. He has like his self-mitigation, where he has his self-barrier. And then he has a bunch of clumping, and then you could pair that with Leica. Loads of damage, lots of CC, very cool. But even though I think that the obvious answer here is going to be Rowan, or Rowan, whatever you want to say his name is, Rowan, especially if you even have a singular copy of Rowan to begin with. And if you don't, you should definitely be using it because you have Rowan, or because you don't have Rowan, you should definitely be selecting him. I do actually kind of want to give a special shout out to Igor, because I will kind of just anecdotally explain that through every fight that I've encountered with this guy, through every PvP match that I've encountered with this guy, he is so beyond frustrating to fight against. And if you haven't fought against Igor, Igor is a warrior who should really be categorized as an assassin, because long story short, what he does is that he drops gravestones on the ground and he hops between the gravestones endlessly so long as the gravestones aren't broken, and will continuously have extra lives, or have extra lives based on how many tombstones are left around. And for me, if you aren't dealing enough damage, or if you aren't doing enough damage to the enemy team, Igor will literally just keep hopping and dropping tombstones, and hopping to the next one, dropping a tombstone before you can like kill him, and then he'll spawn to the next one. And for me, in terms of actual value, I would probably say that Igor is tied, especially if you already have, you know, Rowan, and you're kind of considering another character. I understand, and I definitely acknowledge just how good a character like Iron is, especially in PvP and things of that nature. But seriously consider, as an underdog pick, just how insane Igor is, because again, though he may not be the most insane for other content, my goodness, this character is just so frustrating to fight against. I cannot stress that enough. He's also pretty decent, especially in story. I think him and Iron have about the same value in story, just, again, kind of using whatever characters that you synergize with. But before I leave from this topic, and part of the reason why I do kind of want to give a little bit more value to the idea of using Igor is that, as you just saw before when I was trying to come up with a team composition specifically to try and beat the Dream Realm, I didn't have a faction bonus when I had Cannaaaa. And if you don't have someone like Thorin, you're kind of not, you know, you don't have that many good options for characters that you can use. In my case, all I have access to is, you know what I mean, Carolina, who may not be the worst character ever, but like, do I want 2 DPS? Like, wouldn't it be better if I had somewhat, you know, someone more frontliney? Because even Viperion, though decent, is not so much of a frontline. And ultimately, since I'm kind of waiting for Thorin to kind of, or I guess I could imagine someone waiting for Thorin to show up on their account, I think it would be nice to have another frontline character that isn't just running, you know, again, like Rowan and a bunch of like backliners, like, you know, like the Muriel and stuff like that. So in that case, if you do want to end up using Cannaaaa and you don't want to have to invest in a DPS that's like maybe not the most insane, again, like someone like Sylvina, or someone like, again, like Carolina, I would consider investing a little bit into Igor. Again, this is only if, you know, you've already got Rowan and you don't really like the way that Iron or any of the other characters play. I would seriously consider, I guess I would just seriously consider trying out the Igor. Again, maybe it's just me, maybe it's just the composition that I've run, but I sincerely think that that character has brought me so much pain and misery that it was worth mentioning. But anyways, guys, that's kind of my little wrap up of today. I apologize. Again, just as a free-to-play, or I guess I should include this, just as a free-to-play, the answer is almost always going to be Rowan or Rowan. I don't know why I can't say his name right. It's Rowan. And the reason why I would definitely use Rowan is because even if you already have him, or if you already have an imprint, outside of wanting something like a hero collection, I don't think the other characters are so significant that you couldn't make up for them in some other way. Maybe if you're arguably trying to do something like Legend Trials, you may need one of the other characters, but I think Rowan, both in imprint and both if you haven't gotten at least one of them, in general, is extremely, extremely valuable, so probably pick him. But I just wanted to mention that though many people will probably immediately go to Iron, if you don't have Huon, it doesn't feel that good to play Wind, to be honest with you. Leica is cool, but you know what I mean? Byron maybe is also cool, but not many people have Byron. And in that case, again, it's just something worth noting. But I just wanted to make, you know, I just wanted to kind of give a PSA, because especially for the hero chest, I've seen a lot of people just immediately drop onto Rowan and then just disregard Brutus and Igor. But I actually think that Igor is a pretty good character. But yeah. Anyways, guys, that's going to be it for this video. I apologize for debating you the first time, but thank you again for everyone that has been watching and supporting all my content and my videos. I sincerely cannot express to you guys how much I appreciate it. If you guys want to talk a bit more about AFK Journey or learn more, make sure to join the Discord. At me on Discord, social media, different social medias, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok, etc. Let me know what you like about the game. If you've been enjoying the game, what you feel the game needs, what you feel like it doesn't. But anyways, guys, that's going to be it. Thank you so much for watching. This is not an April Fool's Day joke. happy April 1st. I'll see you guys on the next one. Good night.